Welcome to Infertility and Me podcast, a show that amplifies diverse stories about the struggles of infertility and fertility in a safe space. Our goal is to normalize fertility stories that validate, give hope, and create a community where no one is left silently suffering. Welcome, you guys, to another episode of Infertility and Me podcast. I am your host, Monique Farouk, your fertility friend, advocate. Thank you so much for being here. If this is your first time tuning into the show, welcome to the shit show that is infertility. Please be advised, this is an adult program. And make sure you check out the Patreon page, and you can support the podcast on a monthly basis for as little as $5 a month on Patreon, where you will get early access to episodes that will be ad-free, as well as private community with other members who have joined and supported the show on Patreon with private group chat. And I thank you guys for all of your support. Make sure you guys are following on Instagram for your fertility related content to keep up with episodes and when they drop, as well as connecting with others in the community through the social sharing of posts and such. So today our guest is named Amanda Monelli. Amanda can be found on Instagram at the_elusive_egg, where she shares her journey to motherhood through IVF for both of her daughters. Amanda and her husband suffered years of infertility, diminished ovarian reserve diagnosis, and poor egg quality before welcoming their two daughters, who were conceived through two separate IVF cycles. Amanda went through unsuccessful IUIs like many of us. So Amanda shares all that with us today in this episode, and how she coped with having diminished ovarian reserve with poor egg quality as well. So we'll be back in just a minute, you guys, with Amanda. Alrighty, you guys, we are back with our girl, Amanda Monelli. Thank you, Amanda, dear, for coming onto the show and being a voice for the voiceless, my dear. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
The pleasure is all mine. Just gonna start at the beginning, girl. How did you and hubby meet? How did that all go down?
Well, it's kind of funny. We the same high school, but we were not high school sweethearts. Everybody kind of thinks that, oh, you were high school sweethearts when I say that, but we actually, just kind of had a lot of mutual friends. And then we connected when we were in college. We went to different colleges and just started talking on AIM. I'm dating myself by saying that. But we kind of connected through there, and then the rest was history. So got married in 2016, and we moved to Lancaster, and we lived there for about 8-9 years, and now we are back in our hometown. So that's been interesting. We've kind of made full circle. So
Yes, I love it. I love it that you guys knew each other in high school. That is so cute. Love that. And then it makes it easier because you guys have a lot in common to talk about and reminisce about. So that's wonderful. I'm so glad things worked out for you guys. After you guys got married in 2016, did you go full swing into trying to conceive, or did you guys take some time first? How long had you been married?
we actually did not. We took about a year. We decided we wanted to take a year and kind of get settled and focus on our marriage a little bit. And then after a year is when we started trying. That would have been about 2017.
Did you have any previous diagnoses prior to trying to conceive?
I did not. I had no reason to believe wouldn't work. That's why I gave it the year, because I thought, oh, no big deal. I'm young-ish. I shouldn't have too much of a problem. So yeah, we gave it a year, and then we started trying. But in retrospect, I probably wish we didn't do that.
Yeah, but we live and learn. And then, like you said, you didn't have any reason to believe otherwise, right? So was
Right.
motherhood something that you always looked forward to at some point if you found love?
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to be a mom, even when like a career, my career path was uncertain and I didn't know I always knew I wanted to be a mom, like no matter what. So that was something that was important to me, important to my husband, and something we knew we both wanted to pursue.
Yeah, I understand. So when you guys did start trying to conceive, and what was the point during that time? Of course, we get 6 months to a year, right, before we can get referred. And so during that 6 months to a year, when did the light bulb go off that something may be going on unforeseen?
Oh, I was so naive. I really thought month 1, 2, 3, I thought, okay, like it's going to happen. Maybe we just didn't get the timing right. Or I thought for sure it was going to happen the next month and the next month. And then probably like 4 to 5 months in, I was like, okay, like let's get more serious about tracking ovulation. And I downloaded all the apps. I started to use ovulation predictors, the sticks, and we started to get more serious. Then around like month 6, 7, I was like, oh, like I really think that there's could potentially be something wrong.
Okay.
And I was able to get in with my OB a little bit early to get some of that preliminary testing before moving to a fertility specialist. I voiced some concern. She was very open to getting some initial blood work start, which was nice. And then that's where I found out I had low AMH. That was kind of the first indicator that something wasn't where it should be.
I know it's been a couple of years and you may not be able to recall every little single detail, but walk us through how that felt like when you heard those words that your reserve was quite low for your age.
Yeah, I never expected, no one I knew, this is before getting into the infertility community. So no one I knew personally had ever had that diagnosis, and that was kind of pre-diagnosis. They were, taking that blood work, and then I got more blood work done, and it came back that my FSH was high. So I probably had poor quality eggs. And that's when I then was referred to a fertility specialist to look further into what my options were, and that was terrifying because when you hear like what are my options, it's like, oh, this isn't going to just happen, So that's when it really hit me.
Sounds like a terminal illness almost sometimes when you in the reproductive endocrinologist's office or the radiologist's office and you're like going through all it's like you feel like for me infertility feels like a death sentence almost sometimes because it's so devastating. And how were you handling it while going through all these appointments, or were you like keeping yourself busy and things?
I'd like to say I handled it well, but I don't think I did.
None of us
I,
do,
I
trust.
continued to work. And I'm a school psychologist, so I continue to work and kind of throw myself into that type of thing and trying to pursue like self-care type activities and going to the gym and reading books. And I think
Going through all the
I did,
things,
and I
yeah.
I think I went down every road as far as like any gadget you can buy. I bought some kind of watch that I bought essential oils. I just kind of threw myself into trying to fix, quote unquote, my problem during that time. In my head, I still thought, okay, I can kind of turn this around. But again, very
Yeah.
naive there in the beginning of what this actually meant for me.
Yeah. I think we all kind of go through that naivety at some point, especially in the beginning, and you get your diagnosis. It's like that whole first year is like we we stay in that naivety and thinking that it's going to happen faster than it usually does, or that it's going to go as smooth as we think it does, because I think when we get the diagnosis, because we have it and we have clarification about what the problem is, I feel like sometimes we think that that's going to make the process easier, and it does from the scientific standpoint, but not the emotional aspect, right?
Yes.
It's just a lot to deal with, a lot to process too. So what was the next step after you had your initial consultation with the RE? Did they go ahead and test again for like almost like a get a second opinion? Did they go with what was found previously?
No, they redid all the blood work, which would have been really nice if everything was, covered by insurance. And that's such a huge, in Pennsylvania at least, where I'm from, it's not something that's, universally covered. Most insurances, I'm going to venture a guess to say, don't cover it. Yeah, we got all the blood work and all the tests redone, and everything was good there. There were no uterine problems, so that was good. So I got all that preliminary testing done through that RE, and kind of put a plan together of how we were going to move forward. And they did start out with, the least invasive, and we kind of moved from there. Started with Clomid, and which
That is one famous drug. Let me tell you.
my Yes.
That is one famous drug that we all cannot seem to get away from in the beginning, and that just like gives you that Clomid gives you a taste of what all the other invasive forms of medication is like because it gives
Oh,
you a hormonal and craziness too as well. It's like the trigger shots and all
I
that stuff.
know. I
But
remember that being such a that was like a roller coaster drug. Ooh. Yeah.
absolutely. Were you in hubby's thought process going into it after you had all your testing done and they knew exactly what was happening and they started you guys on the IUIs? Were you guys looking forward to the IUIs, hopeful?
I was so hopeful. I really thought, okay, like we're seeing a reproductive specialist. Of course, this is going to happen. I'll be pregnant next month. And then 3 IUIs later, I still wasn't pregnant. And I started off with Clomid, and then I ended up moving to injectable medications for my IUIs because of my low reserve. I really wasn't responding to Clomid at all. I wasn't making follicles. I was just making one follicle, which you want multiple when you're, especially with a low reserve and poor quality eggs. They wanted to see more. So I did move to the injectables pretty quickly, and then we did the 3 rounds of the IUI with the injectable medications, and still were not successful.
Where did you guys go from there? Did you jump right into IVF or did you give it some time first?
Late 2018, we kind of reassessed things. I had the last IUI I had that failed. They left a message for me on my cell phone, on my voicemail, to let me know that it wasn't successful. And I think in your gut, the quality of care and with how sensitive it was, of a process, an emotional process that it is. I just didn't feel like I was kind of getting that support that I was looking for from that clinic. So we did look around and I found Shady Grove Fertility, which is who I ended up going with. I had a great experience with them. So I was really happy that I kind of made that leap and moved to a different clinic to kind of start the more invasive procedures and start IVF.
How many cycles did you guys end up doing before you became pregnant with you guys' daughter?
We did one initial cycle, and that yielded one abnormal embryo. So and when that happened, I was devastated because in my
Hmm.
mind, I was like, IVF's such a sure thing. Again, so naive. I say that I say that now, but then I thought, okay, like I'll do 1 round of IVF and it'll be fine, and we'll get a baby. And then when I got that phone call that, we only had one embryo, and then when that embryo was sent and it was severely chromosomally abnormal, it was heartbreaking. It was devastating. So then we kind of reassessed again. Should we through this again? What should, path to parenthood be? Like, is this the right move? Will this happen for us? And then we did pursue a second round with Shady Grove. Our RE was hopeful. And I think that's what our first clinic was kind of lacking. I needed my doctor to have the hope that I didn't necessarily have all
Mm,
the time. I
hmm.
needed kind of a team behind me to
Keep you pushed.
champion
Yeah.
and push, and
Yeah.
I needed that, like, me as a person. And that is what I found when I did go to Shady Grove. My doctor, Dr. Wynn, she was just very hopeful and very innovative in what she was willing to try with me. I did estrogen priming, and she had some tricks up her sleeve that we hadn't tried before, as far as protocol. Did a second round, and again, we got one embryo, which I thought, oh my gosh, this is happening again. Instead of being thankful, I was like, this is happening again. This is going to be abnormal, and we're going to be in the same boat. And she did have a conversation with me. She was very frank that, if this happens again, like, we may need to talk about egg donation or embryo
Hmm.
donation, and
Hmm.
we may need to talk about, some other options and what it could possibly look like. So we sent the embryo for PGS testing, and it came back normal. Still remember the day. I still remember exactly where I was when I got that phone call, the
Right.
street I was on. I remember her voice. I remember everything about that phone call.
It's like replaying it in your mind, right? That's how I see it in my head, like a movie playing back when you think about it, right?
Yes, and I know that's not PGS normal embryo isn't a guarantee at all, but it was one more hurdle toward that we hadn't gotten to before. So
That hope that you needed to carry you on through to the
Yes.
remainder of the cycle. I get it. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
that.
I just needed something to hang on to, and that was, one more step toward a possible baby. So we transferred that embryo in April. I was so nervous. I did all the things. The French fry, like I did all the things. All the good, the pineapple, the good, all the things. Just
Yes.
in hopes that it would work. She did put me on? I had never been pregnant before, so we really didn't know how my body would respond. Like we didn't know if I had any type of immune issues that just weren't coming through with the blood work. Like we didn't know how my body would respond to pregnancy. So I did end up taking prednisone and Lovenox and kind of the kitchen
The
sink
cocktail.
protocols because we had just one embryo to work with. So we kind of
Doing
put it all out
everything.
there
Yeah.
just to see what would happen.
Hmm.
I got, my calendar, and right around Mother's Day was when I was to have my beta. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is either going to be the worst day of my life, as it has. Mother's Day is had always been a hard day, since we're kind of struggling with infertility. So I already wasn't, really looking forward to it. But then when I found out my beta was going to be right around there, I was worried. I did test then the morning of my beta, and
Did you?
I
Interesting.
did because, for my IUIs, I always had the clinic call. I never tested. And I just thought, if it's a part of the process that maybe I could feel a little bit more control over, maybe that would help me a little bit. I don't know. That's what I was thinking when and it was positive to my absolute shock. It was
What did you
positive.
do? What did you do? I
I
need the details.
I was so shocked. So my husband, I was like, said I wasn't going to test, or I would wait for him to be there for me when I tested. And this was totally out of the blue. I was just like, you know what? I need to know. I'm just going to do it. He wasn't home at the time. I just did it. And, to my surprise, it was positive, and I was able to have a little bit of surprise him in sort of a more typical way. Not that he didn't know that it could be a possibility. It wasn't totally spontaneous, but it was kind of nice. I wrapped it up and I gave it to him when he came home. And, it was a little bit of normalcy in such a clinical process.
I totally get that, and I'm so glad that you were able to do that because a lot of us don't get the opportunity. We're waiting around with our spouses, or just having the beta just takes the thrill out of it all. So I'm so glad that you guys were still able to do that. And so now that you're pregnant, did you have a ton of anxieties like most of us in the early parts of your pregnancy or throughout the entire pregnancy?
I had a ton of anxiety my pregnancy. I would describe myself as an anxious person to begin with. Ton of anxiety around, if the pregnancy was going to last, what was going to happen. And then as I progressed later in my pregnancy, I was worried about everything. So I don't know that I fully got to soak in the joy of that pregnancy because I just was so focused on keeping it.
I get it. So how old was your daughter when you guys started trying again for sibling?
Started trying. March 2021 is when we started to pursue our third round for our second baby. And then we made out a lot better on that round for whatever reason. And I always laugh because I didn't do any kind of diets. I had a toddler.
Mhm. Running around being busy. Yeah,
Yeah, a little bit over a year. Yeah, I just didn't have time to do those things. So I didn't do the diets. I was heavier than I was. I never really lost the baby weight from the first baby.
yeah.
I wasn't working out. I was doing all quote unquote wrong things. I was going to acupuncture with my first baby, before, during, and after. You know, and I didn't do any of that. And I got 2 embryos that came back chromosomally normal, which I was so
Wonderful.
thankful for.
Right.
And then we transferred in May 2021. We transferred, and I found out that that transfer took as well, and I became pregnant with my second daughter.
Surreal, very surreal moments, very surreal moments. Did you test again on beta
I
day?
did. I actually tested before beta day. I tested on like day 4 or 5 past transfer, and I was getting a really faint. Actually, the first test I took, I said to my husband, I'm like, it didn't work.
Mm,
I don't see anything here. And then
mhm,
a couple of minutes later, I looked again and I saw just the faintest line, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think it
maybe.
might have worked.
OMG.
Cautiously optimistic, but I think it might have worked.
Yeah.
So then I, of course, kept testing and watching, hoping that the line got darker as we went on, and I ended up, with a good solid beta that increased the way it was supposed to, and the rest was history. And I had her on January 31st of 2022, so she's about 12
Yeah.
weeks old.
Oh, yes, so precious. I saw the pictures. So precious. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. Wonderful. Wow. What a story. What a story. So you didn't have anyone else in your family who would have suffered then from infertility because I know sometimes these things can be, genetic and all. You didn't have anybody else in your family who would ever went through this?
It's so funny you ask. I'm an only child. My my mom actually had endometriosis. So I was actually conceived, which in the 1980s, which was with Clomid. My mom had to use some fertility treatments to conceive me, but I never had an endometriosis symptoms and ended up, through testing and did not have endometriosis. It wasn't something I had symptoms for. Always something in the back of my mind, of course, but it wasn't. I didn't have any reason to believe that, I wouldn't be able to conceive. I really was optimistic in the beginning because she had like debilitating pain and different things that she went through with women do who suffer with endometriosis. And I didn't have that. And I had normal periods. So that was like my only, kind of genetically.
Links or anything? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So how are you moving through the lasting effects of the trauma of infertility?
Yeah.
I know it's a loaded, loaded
It
question.
it is a loaded question, and I was just saying this to my husband. I had a C-section with my first daughter, and it was a 4-day long induction that ended up, quote unquote, failing and ended in a C-section. And I had a C-section then for my second daughter as well, a repeat C-section. And it wasn't really until I was on that table that I was really, kind of everything was kind of going by in a
Coming
flash,
up
and
for you.
and
Yeah.
and it was I really realized just how traumatic, like, all of this has been, and I don't think I really let myself. I was just going from cycle to cycle to cycle, and I was so in it that I don't think I ever really sat back to be like, "Wow, this was a lot."
So did you have a lot of like postpartum emotional things going on with both of the girls or your oldest? As far
Uh,
as just with dealing with postpartum and some of the feelings that were arising because of infertility and
Yeah,
stuff.
surprisingly, I did not have postpartum depression or anxiety. I mean, besides what I kind of normally,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
I normally function. But
Yes.
it was weird though. There was a unique element because my first daughter was born in the height of the pandemic. A couple months later, the world shut down. She was born December
Right.
31st, 2019, and then the world kind of shut down in March. Um, so that was definitely, different. I was, obviously so concerned that, we were going to contract COVID and I would bring it home, and, what I had worked so hard for was going to get stolen from me again. And it was definitely interesting. And I definitely think I dealt with some things that I'm sure, maybe people who just have normal, conceptions and and I say
Yeah.
normal, atypical,
Typical, yes, for
pregnancies and
sure.
conceptions,
Yeah.
go through. I think I definitely had a little bit of a heightened sense of
Yeah.
anxiety as
Oh
far as
yeah.
that. that way.
For our friends listening who may be dealing with AMH or diminished ovarian reserve, if there's a last word that you would have for them to encourage and give them a little piece of hope, slice of hope.
I wish I could come up with something packed with wisdom, because it was just it was so hard, and there is no real sugarcoating that. During that time when I was struggling, I did seek out the help of a counselor. I did talk to someone who dealt with specialized in infertility, and I think that was really helpful. I got connected with our wonderful infertility community, which has been just such a support. So I found other people like me who have had success and gotten to the other side, so to speak. So I think seeing those stories of hope is really what I do, because my AMH was very, very low. I heard all the time that it might not happen for me. So I think holding on to those little pieces of hope and reaching out for that support was just critical for me.
I love that you reminded everyone to do those things for themselves. And it's definitely a selfish thing to do because, of course, you want to include your spouse, but sometimes you have to get the help you need without them. And they're not ready, especially if you're with a hetero cis man. They're very freaking stubborn, you guys, okay? Ugh,
Yes.
trying to break through that wall, okay?
Amen.
OMG. So tell us where we can find you online, my dear.
I am at the elusive egg. Hope that I could be the light and the support that I received in my time of need. I hope that I can be that for someone else.
So you guys make sure that you're following Amanda, that you connect with her, okay? And make sure that you also follow Infertility and Me podcast, okay? So we can stay up to date with one another. And you can tag me in all your fantastic posts if you want me to see your update. But Amanda, thank you, my dear, so much for speaking to us about diminished ovarian reserve, also known as, okay? We need more stories like this. A lot of women are very afraid to talk about having low quality eggs and or low egg count, and it's just a reality we have to deal with, you guys. There's no shame in that. That's what Amanda's been saying this whole time. Just go with it the way you can. There's no shame in it. Somebody else is also dealing with or have dealt with what you've been through, and she's here. So take advantage, you guys. Okay, connect with Amanda online, and you'll be listening back on the next episode, you guys. Peace and blessings.